Now it works. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome at this press conference where High Representative Vice President Federica Mogherini and Commissioner Johannes Hahn will present this year's so-called enlargement package, and then the floor will be yours for a few questions. Before I give the floor to them, just to say that the complete package, so the press material as well as all documents, have been put online and are now available for you to read. High Rep, you have the floor.
Thank you, Maya. I'm happy, as every year, to be here with you and with Commissioner Hahn to present this year's enlargement package, which, as you know, is the regular assessment we do of the work that has been done during the past year in the region with our partners to see where we are with the European Union integration of the Western Balkans, as well as in our relations with Turkey as a candidate country. It is a very important moment, both for us and for our partners. And you will see in the package very clearly that we confirm a credible enlargement policy being a geostrategic investment for the European Union itself, in peace, stability, security and prosperity for the whole of Europe. It is, we believe, in our own interest to have a successful enlargement policy. The European perspective remains the driver for change, especially in the Balkans, and this should not be underestimated nor taken for granted. What you will read in this report, be it the deep, unprecedented judicial reform in Albania or the changes in North Macedonia, is the direct result of the people's strong desire for change in these countries. We've always stressed with our partners in our work with our partners that they have made a fundamental choice that is based on values, in setting the European Union accession as their national goal that unites the people and the institutions and the region, maybe one of the few things that unites the region, and also with the remarkable phenomenon of the region supporting the process for all the neighbours. By making this choice, both political leaders and citizens choose to engage in serious, comprehensive and convincing reforms in very important areas, in crucial areas for the society. First of all, on the rule of law, including the fight against corruption and organised crime, and also on economic reforms. Think of competitiveness, as well as on regional cooperation and reconciliation. I often say the enlargement policy in a region like the Balkans brings us back to the DNA of the European Union integration process at its very first steps, overcoming the wounds of war that is still recent, and using integration in the European Union as a fundamental tool for reconciliation after a conflict. Tremendous work was done to assess objectively the progress made. I want to thank all the teams, both in Brussels and in the region, that have worked impressively to produce these reports. The preparation of these reports is an inclusive process, and they take into account contributions not only from the authorities but also from civil society and from a number of other partners. I will let Commissioner Hahn debrief you on the details, obviously, but I would like just to underline a few points. The first one is that over the last years, and in particular in the last year, the European Union has invested enormously across the Western Balkans, including through the adoption of the Western Balkan Strategy, the Sofia Summit, as well as with not only our visits in the region that are usual, but also a number of other high-level engagements. We have witnessed a number of achievements and successes which are impressive. North Macedonia and Albania, in particular, have embraced the opportunity and delivered on the reforms. The historic Prespa Agreement, ending the name dispute with Greece and strengthening good neighbourly relations, as it has been done also with Bulgaria, is something we all value and recognise and acknowledge as an historic game changer, not only for the country but for the region. And in Albania, in particular, let me stress the impressive implementation of the deep and ambitious justice reform as continued steadily, and the re-evaluation of all judges and prosecutors is delivering tangible results. I was recently visiting Tirana for the Leaders Summit, and I was also impressed by the, I think, highest in Europe level of support for the European Union among the public opinion in the country. On the basis of a strict and fair assessment, this year, for the second time, the Commission recommends opening of negotiations with Albania and with North Macedonia. This is a recommendation based on solid assessment, as you will be able to see from the reports. North Macedonia and Albania have done their part of the work, and now it is the European Union turn to fulfill its part. Now, obviously, after our recommendation, the ball is in the Council court. We also issue today the Commission's opinion on Bosnia-Herzegovina's application for membership of the European Union. In this context, the Commission specifies a number of detailed priorities in the field of democracy, rule of law, fundamental rights and public administration reform that are needed for the country to move forward towards the candidate status and then opening negotiations. It is also clear, as I've had the opportunity together with Commissioner Hahn to discuss with the leadership of the country, that the formation of the government remains key. Finally, I will say a word on Turkey and then pass the floor to Commissioner Hahn. Turkey, which remains a candidate country, a key partner and strategically important neighbour for the European Union, also given its proximity to a very volatile Middle East, whose stability is a key priority for both of us. The Turkish government states its commitment to the European Union accession, but we see the country continues to move further away from the European Union. We believe it would be beneficial for all, and in particular for the Turkish citizens, if this trend is reversed urgently, which we would obviously always welcome. We also emphasize the importance of good neighbourly relations and avoiding tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean, and you have seen my recent statements in particular on this issue. To conclude, let me stress that this package passes a number of important messages, not only to our partners, but also to ourselves. It underlines the need for the Union to live up to its commitments, give credit where credit is due. We are at a crossroads. We always say it's a merit-based process, so when merit is assessed as positive, needs to be acknowledged. Failure to recognise and respond to objective progress, we believe, would damage the European Union's credibility throughout the region and beyond. Not rewarding historic achievements in particular and substantial reforms also would undermine stability and discourage seriously further reforms, and in particular would introduce an element of disillusion, especially in the young population that is so supportive of the European Union perspective of their countries and of the European Union as such, as an institution. Over the past almost 5 years, we have seen results in the Western Balkans that seemed impossible, completely impossible to achieve when our mandate started. This has been the result of a collective work we've done together here in Brussels and in the Balkans, thanks also to a new generation of leaders in the region across the party lines. So our collective responsibility today is to make these changes irreversible to the benefit not only of the region but also of the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Yeah, welcome to everybody. Honestly, I don't know how this was possible, but I think for the first time ever the paper was not leaked, so maybe we can really tell you some news, good news.
Distracted with other things.
But I think we cannot repeat it next time. Anyway, I think indeed we can take stock of some good progress, and it was already elaborated by the High Representative what has been achieved. I think particularly 2018 was an excellent year for the Western Balkans. I think with the launch of the Western Balkan strategy, President Juncker's mission to the region, the Sofia summit, and on top of all this, the Prespa agreement, which was definitely the highlight of the year, to settle a conflict which was there for more than 30 years. And this is usually something which is unresolvable, but it was done, and it is therefore something which has to be awarded. But step by step, I would look into the different countries and their achievements. First, of course, the most positive examples are indeed North Macedonia and Albania, which have really embraced the window of opportunity to open, to use, so to say, what has been established in the West Balkan strategy in a best possible way. Both countries have delivered, especially in the areas set out unanimously in the General Council conclusion of June 2018. I think it's important to stress again and again, whatever we are agreeing with our partner countries as a European Union is on the basis of a unanimous decision by all our member states. Albania, coming to Albania in particular, has pursued a major transformation of its justice system. I think we could report on this several times, including an unprecedented re-evaluation of judges and prosecutors. This vetting process is of fundamental importance for eradicating corruption and rebuilding trust and confidence in the judiciary. Institutional restructuring of the judiciary has also continued, as well as determined efforts in the fight against corruption and organized crime. International cooperation has led to a number of successful, larger-scale law enforcement operations against organized criminal network leaders. Of course, more has to be done. We are by far not at the end of our joint efforts, but I think we should also recognize what has already been achieved. North Macedonia has not only continued its ambitious reform agenda in the areas set out by the Council in June 2018, but again has reached a historic agreement with Greece, and in the meantime not only on the government level, but has implemented it by adjusting the necessary paragraphs in the Constitution, and this has already been acknowledged also by Greece by supporting or launching the accession negotiations to NATO. With the Prespa agreement, they have also reached out to the neighbors, and this was also the case, but already the year before, to Bulgaria. And in that respect, North Macedonia has become a great example of reconciliation and good neighborly relations for the entire region. And once for a sudden, North Macedonia is now the only country in the region which doesn't have any bilateral conflict with its neighbors. And I think also this is something one should highlight. Regarding reform implementation, I would like to mention the strengthening of the independence of the judiciary, the establishment of the State Commission for Prevention of Corruption and the public administration reform. Also, the presidential elections have been conducted in a free and fair way. Overall, the system of check and balances has been restored, consolidating the rule of law and democracy in the country. Today, it's also an important day for Bosnia-Herzegovina. The Commission has adopted its opinion on Bosnia-Herzegovina's application for the Union membership to be followed by a decision of the Council. This is a milestone in our relations, showing that the Union is committed to support the country with its reform process. It's crucial now that governments are formed at all levels in Bosnia-Herzegovina without any further delay. Why I'm stressing this? Because we cannot recommend our member states to ask us to further pursue on all this if there are no interlocutors in power. And therefore, we urge all the respective and responsible politicians in Bosnia-Herzegovina to work now on the formation of a government at the federation level, but also on the state level, having in mind that the elections took place in October last year. Coming to Montenegro and Serbia, of course, there is progress in some fields, but they need to implement reforms in the rule of law area more strongly and more credible. Serbia needs also to establish a conducive environment for the conclusion of a comprehensive, legally binding agreement with Kosovo. But in that respect, I acknowledge a speech given by President Vučić in the recent days, which sounds, at least from my point of view, rather positive. But coming to Kosovo, Kosovo needs to focus on the implementation of the Stabilization and Association Agreement. Of course, it needs to abolish the 100% tariffs imposed on imports from Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina, to resume the dialogue with Serbia. And I will try already in June, I will make another attempt to deblock this situation by reaching out to these two, maybe to prepare something for July. I don't know if it will be successful, but in any case, we should use every opportunity and try our best to deblock this situation, which is harming not only the development of the two, but the whole region. As usual, and this was already said by the High Representative, but it's important to stress it again and again, everything what we are doing is based on hard facts, objective, firm, but fair. So our analysis are something where our member states can rely on it, and I think this is also important for the future assessment. Of course, a lot remains to be done in the Western Balkans, like every year. Overall, the region needs to deliver more genuine and sustainable results on key issues such as the rule of law, fight against corruption, organized crime, fundamental rights, functioning of democratic institutions. It needs also to make progress on reconciliation, good neighbourly relations, regional cooperation, again following the excellent example of North Macedonia. May I say, this year we have paid for the first time particular attention to, let's say, the activities of China in the region. We are not criticizing the activities per se, but what we take care more than we did in the past probably is that European standards have to be respected, particularly in the area of competition law, public procurement, transparency, the consequences of certain financial engagement activities, etc., because here we have a particular obligation as partners to care about a healthy, sustainable development of countries, and therefore also all these elements have to be respected, and we have paid particular attention in our annual report on all these issues. I think, and also this was already said, and I really would like to repeat it, one should understand starting negotiations doesn't mean we conclude this tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. It's a long-lasting process. We are talking about several years. The whole process, for instance, with Croatia, the youngest member state, took altogether finally 8 years, and it's unrealistic to believe any new accession process will be shorter. Although, I have to say again, everything is merit-based. It's a regatta. It's not excluded that one or the other is moving faster. But again, it's important to understand the whole process is the best possible leverage to change in a sustainable, reliable way the situation in the country to its best towards European standards. In that respect, I count on the European Council to have a proper reaction to what we have presented and to take the necessary decisions as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The floor now goes to you. As usual, please introduce yourself and the media you're working for before you ask your questions. I'll start with Georgi.
Thanks, Maya. Georgi Gotov, your active question for the High Representative. I hear your message to the member states that reformist countries need to be rewarded. North Macedonia and Albania were mentioned in particular. I wonder, of course, if the same message would be heard by the member states. But rewarding countries has indeed worked in the past. I have followed closely the accession of Bulgaria and Romania, and they were rewarded actually not exactly for reform. They were rewarded for having given their airspace to NATO for the 1999 war. And actually it was the UK that was the advocate for Bulgaria and Romania's enlargement. So I'm wondering now that the UK is on its way out, who is going to push for enlargement? Who are the friends of the EU enlargement among the member states?
I'll try to answer. What I have seen in this last 5 years is a remarkable unity in the region, remarkable because of the region, of the nature of the region, of the history of the region. And I see that the best sponsors for the different countries' European Union integration process, being them already negotiating ones or not yet, are the neighbors. I see that the Western Balkans countries, the Balkan countries, being them already members of the European Union or not, are the ones that are supporting the most the process, are advising, are pushing for, are creating an environment of mutual support that I think is in itself a proof of the fact that the process is convenient for the European Union and for Europe as a continent as such. I tend not to use the category of rewarding because negotiating and finally entering the European Union in perspective is a process of joining a family, joining an institution, a community. It's not a prize you win. It's a process you engage in with, well, some inside the European Union. You mentioned the UK, might argue on the opposite kind of process as a rewarding one. But it's a choice. It's a choice to belong to a community, to a family, to stick to certain standards in all different fields. And what strikes me the most is these two things. In the region, in the Balkans, I've seen in these 5 years, the region shifting from a logic of competition and confrontation to a logic of mutual support, understanding that the better the one does, the better it is also for the other. So moving from the logic of competing among neighbors to the logic of pushing together to create a better environment regionally, being together under the same roof, creating also the space for reconciliation and economic prosperity, which is the secret of the success of the European Union over decades. And the second thing is the very large and deep popular support for this process. In almost all the countries in the Western Balkans, you see percentages of popular support to the European Union and to the European Union integration process and perspective included on fulfilling the conditions for the different steps, as high as 70, 80, 90% in the population. Numbers that, if you would ask to, I would say almost any of the European Union member states are long gone. So I think that the European Union needs this energy and this determination and this push for a certain quality of standards and this desire to come together in a community and in an integration process as much as the Balkans need it.
Augustin.
Thank you, Augustin Palokaj from Jutarnji List, Croatian coaditore. The question about Kosovo, I see here, because we didn't get a report, there were no leaks because there practically was not much interest. But the situation in the north of Kosovo with regard to organized crime continues to pose challenges for law enforcement agency. This is your conclusion, I guess. Yesterday, Kosovo police had an operation which Kosovo claims it's operation against organized crime. The reaction from President of Serbia, Vučić, I don't know why Commissioner Hahn considers his speech positive, but he was threatening with a military intervention in Kosovo. So, and this is a confrontation rhetoric, not a cooperation rhetoric. So do you think that it's possible to have a successful fight against organized crime in the north part of Kosovo if there is such a political confrontation and such statements coming from Belgrade? Thank you.
I think that what happened yesterday in North Kosovo shows us that the status quo is not sustainable, and both Pristina and Belgrade need to come back to the dialogue table and move forward with a comprehensive, legally binding agreements that would make it the full normalization of relations happen. I believe what happened yesterday is a stark reminder for all of us of this need that they both have and we all have, I think, and the entire region has, as Commissioner Hahn has mentioned, full normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina through a legally binding comprehensive agreement would be also the best way to guarantee that the entire region benefits from reconciliation, which means from regional integration and economic development in the region. It is true, I spoke about cooperative attitudes in the region, which is something I see today much more than it was the case 5 years ago, in general terms. But we also know, and every second day, I would say, we are reminded of the fact that the tendencies of the past, tendencies to confrontation or to rhetorics that are not cooperative ones, or even of confrontation, and tough confrontation, can reemerge at any moment, and do reemerge from time to time at any moment. And this is why I'm saying we are at a crossroads. If the leverage we have, which is that of a credible perspective for the European Union perspective of the region, is not used in a smart manner today, well, if it is used in a smart manner today, we can encourage these cooperative trends and consolidate them and make this change irreversible. If we miss this opportunity, I see the risk of the dark forces of the past coming back in terms of confrontation, even of conflict, and we might lose an historic opportunity, as I was saying, to use the perspective of the European Union integration as an agent of reconciliation and unity in the region, and also economic prosperity. And this is why I think the people of the region are smart enough to understand that this is convenient for them, as the European Union funding member states were smart enough to understand that it was more convenient to make business together rather than war after the Second World War. So I think the region has made its choice, and this includes, I think, Kosovo and Serbia. I think both the leaderships and the populations are determined and willing to move forward towards an agreement that is normalizing fully relations. But obviously, conditions need to be put in place for that. And first and foremost, I would refer to the need to revoke or suspend the 100% tariffs that were imposed by the government of Kosovo on the goods coming from Serbia and from Bosnia and Herzegovina that clearly are in breach of agreements and are not creating a conducive environment for negotiations. But I am and remain confident and hopeful that wisdom will prevail and talks can be resumed soon. I am, as usual, not only in contact constantly with the two sides, but also always ready to call them here or anywhere else tomorrow morning to restart talks at the highest possible level. And I'm convinced that an agreement is possible, but some decisions need to be taken first. Commission, you want to add something?
I have nothing to add on substance, in particular on the event of yesterday, but only to avoid any misunderstandings. I was referring to a speech of President Vučić a couple of days ago, so before the event of yesterday, to be clear on this.
Geracina.
To Mr. Hahn, Geracina Tuhina, Kosovo Television. Concerning your opinion about readiness of Bosnia and Herzegovina to become candidate for membership in European Union, we've been counting here with my colleague. We have read 17 recommendations of European Commissions, opinions of European Commissions. All of them had clear recommendation about the readiness of a country to become or not a candidate or to open accession talks. Now, this obviously lacks, in your opinion, about Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, how can we read it? Is Bosnia and Herzegovina ready to become candidate country as it has applied a few years ago? Thank you.
I have only counted 14, but this is not the big issue. I think we have made, we have listed 14 issues where we believe progress or decisions have to be taken before either candidate status is granted or negotiations will start. And it's now up to the member states to analyze this and to make up their minds on this and to give a clear instruction what are the next possible steps.
No recommendation, no specific recommendation. We made an analysis, we compared to previous avis coming from your cabinet. It doesn't exist in Bosnian case. There is not a clear reference about recommendation.
No, indeed. I was saying we have listed a number of issues which have to be addressed in order to enable member states to take a decision. What are the next steps and when are the next steps?
Yes, thank you. Dusan Gajic, Radio Television of Serbia. On the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina, High Representative, do you expect a breakthrough to happen still within your term? Is that something achievable, or that would be a job for a next High Representative? And to Commissioner Hahn, given the assessment of the pace of reforms in Serbia, what could Serbia expect in terms of opening negotiating chapters in June and beyond?
I'm still convinced that an agreement is possible if the right conditions are put in place for talks to restart at the highest level. I discussed this as recently as a couple of weeks ago in Tirana with both sides, with both President Taci and President Vucic. I remain convinced, as a facilitator of this dialogue, that the two sides are aware of the interest they respectively have in advancing consistently on this. And I'm also convinced that they would do their utmost to engage. Whatever the time that can be used is there. I wouldn't divide the time into my term, this 5 months we have ahead of us, and my successor, also because there is a certain continuity in the institutional role that the High Representative has as a facilitator. I took this file from my predecessor with a very competent team. The team is there, the team would continue. I wouldn't put a break, a wall, a dividing line between the end of my mandate and the beginning of the next High Representative's mandate. But I would say the sooner the better, because incidents happen and can happen anytime, and time is not playing in favor of neither of the two sides. If an agreement is possible, and as I repeatedly said, I am convinced it is possible and it is in the best interest of both sides, the sooner they manage to get it, the better it is. On our side, we do not dictate or put on the table any outside external proposal. We're there to facilitate the ownership of an agreement that I'm sure they can find if the proper conditions are in place. And I stress here again, it's not a surprise, first and foremost, the need to revoke this 100% tariffs. And obviously, I've also referred to this publicly, I think, recently, the need in the moment when we will re-engage with the two sides in high-level talks, that can happen tomorrow morning from my side, the need to create a protected environment with a sort of moratoria, with a sort of suspension of different kind of campaigns from all sides to create a protected environment for the two sides to negotiate and solve all issues on the table. I'm convinced it is possible, and I'm convinced it is convenient for both, and for the rest of the region, and for the European Union, and for the rest of the world. This is why I think there is, in this moment, a certain alignment of stars, even if it is not too visible, on also the international possible support that this agreement could get. And this is why I would urge the sides to move as fast as possible.
Look, I cannot predict how many chapters will be opened still this year, but I think it's important to understand that our member states take into account, and this influences their assessment, also what are already the achievements, what is already the progress in already opened chapters where we are under negotiations. And this in particular applies for everything which is related to rule of law. So I suppose that member states are very much focused on progress in the area of rule of law in order to give green lights for the opening of other chapters, because there is in a way a link between the two, and therefore I can only repeat and urge Serbia to look into this in order to enable us to open the next chapters, because again, there is a kind of at least informal relationship.
Philippe.
Oui, merci. Philippe Renier du journal Le Soir. Tout d'abord, une question d'ordre un peu politique à Madame la Haute Représentante. Vous soulignez à de très nombreuses reprises combien toute cette politique d'élargissement est stratégique pour la région des Balkans occidentaux et la Turquie également, mais également pour l'Union européenne. Alors, est-ce que vous considérez qu'il était judicieux de reporter sciemment la publication de ce paquet élargissement au-delà des élections européennes, puisque, après tout, ça n'a pas empêché certains candidats à ce scrutin de mener campagne clairement contre l'élargissement, voire même de se targuer d'avoir bloqué l'adhésion de l'Albanie et de la Macédoine du Nord. Et à Monsieur le Commissaire Hahn, je voudrais vous demander si toutes les manifestations que l'on a vues se multiplier dans plusieurs des pays des Balkans occidentaux au cours des derniers mois vous inspirent un commentaire particulier au regard de l'avis du collège exprimé ce matin. Est-ce que effectivement il n'y a pas là, comme souvent c'est dit dans la région, le problème ou le danger de soutenir une sorte de stabilocratie, donc de maintenir nos interlocuteurs en place plutôt que de voir une société civile qui est prise d'un certain sentiment de dégagisme, comme on dit. Merci beaucoup.
Je serai très bref parce que je pense qu'en effet, du point de vue politique, ça ne change pas énormément la date dans laquelle nous avons pris cette décision, nous avons présenté ces recommandations, cette opinion. L'important, c'est la façon dans laquelle maintenant les États membres vont faire la suivi. Et donc, l'important, ce n'est pas tellement quand. Difficilement, ça aurait été en tout cas une décision prise par le Conseil avant aujourd'hui, ça c'est clair. L'important, c'est que maintenant le Conseil prenne sa partie de responsabilité et prenne une décision le plus vite possible. Nous, de notre part, de la part de la Commission, nous avons fait un travail approfondi, comme j'ai déjà dit, qui a pris en considération pas seulement le travail fait avec les autorités des pays concernés, mais aussi les sociétés civiles et certains autres acteurs fondamentaux pour ce processus. Donc ça nous a permis de faire un travail même plus approfondi et plus scrupuleux, je dirais, sur la base détaillée des données que nous avons eues. Donc de notre côté, du côté de la Commission, ça nous permet de donner une recommandation claire, nette, et maintenant, l'important, c'est pas tellement si ces documents étaient présentés aujourd'hui ou si c'était mieux ou le présenter il y a 2 semaines ou dans 2 semaines. L'important maintenant, c'est que le Conseil puisse prendre une décision cohérente, consistent, comme je dirais en anglais, mais je n'ai pas le mot en français, qui puisse donner de la crédibilité au processus dans le plus court délai possible.
Well, I think, may I say, I'm the best proof that I'm not, so to say, in favor of stabilocracy, or however you call it. If you might be aware of what I did in the last 4.5 years, for instance, with today's North Macedonia. But our approach is always there should be, and there has to be a respect of rule of law. I mean, we are advocating kind of entrenchment of rule of law principles, thinking, mentality, behavior to all our countries, to all our partner countries. But sometimes I have the feeling there's an expectation from people inside and outside the region. We, as a European Union, step into a country, should kick out persons which are not reliable or whatsoever, and replace them by others. This is not our understanding, and by the way, we are not able to do so. What we are doing is trying to further develop the democratic system by pushing, for instance, everything which is related to rule of law. That's why we have changed our methodology in the whole process by starting any kind of negotiations with the opening of chapters 23, 24, which are the rule of law chapters, and concluding the process by finishing the negotiations concerning these chapters. And we have the opportunity to interrupt any kind of negotiations if there is standstill or backsliding in the area of rule of law. So this is the focus of our activities, initiatives, everything which is related to it. But again, we don't have the ability, and we don't want to have it, to impose something, but it should be change, if there is change, by democratic instruments, by elections, by votes of individuals. This is what we support. That's why strengthening civil society organizations is so essentially so important. We have now 2 times organized so-called media days in the region. We will have another event of this kind till the end of our mandate, where we really stress the importance of independent media, but also their opportunities to exist in an economic viable way. And if you take all together, I think we have made progress. I understand that some people in and outside the region have a certain impatience, but to change certain very rooted behaviors, mentalities, is not something we can do from one day to the other. But once again, everything has to be based on rule of law principles, respecting democratic procedures.
Jacopo.
Thanks, Maya. Jacopo Ragazzi from Politico. I go back to North Macedonia and Albania because it's unclear to me technically what is going to happen. Meaning, now we have a General Affairs Council on June 18th. But diplomats last night were saying that they don't think that it will be in the position to take a decision, not only because of France and the Netherlands and the interview where Loiseau stressed how she was crucial in June last year to block the 2 countries, but also because of technical problems like the Bundestag. The Bundestag has to say its own opinion, and there is only 1 session in the first week of June. So, if this is the scenario, do you expect at that point the ball to roll in on the table of the heads at the next European Council, as some diplomats say, or do you expect it that it's most likely to have another GAC next month, as other diplomats say? Thank you.
Well, I mean, the General Affairs Council last year has clearly said they will come back on this issue in June this year, but we have now presented by the end of May our report, and it's now up to the member states to take their to make their analysis and to take their decisions. I cannot predict how fast they are. Indeed, there are some so to say conditions based on decision-making processes in some member states. I think our common understanding is to do it as fast as possible. We will support this process as much as we can do. And once again, it's in the interest, this is our deep conviction, to do it as fast as possible in order to give the right signal to the region that huge political efforts are awarded in a respectful and meaningful way, in order also to trigger other issues like we discussed it today already exhaustively, for instance, the quasi restart of the dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo. They need concrete incentives in order to enter into, once again, negotiations which are definitely not easy for both sides. So in that respect, it's not only a signal for the respective individual country, but for the whole region. And I'm sure that the member states are fully aware about their responsibilities.
Tanya.
From MIA, the Agency of North Macedonia. We changed the name. There are differences, even though there are recommendations for both North Macedonia and Albania, there are differences in the wording in the conclusions. So there seem to be some additional remarks or conditions, if I can call them, when it comes to Albania, whereas for North Macedonia, the recommendation seems quite crystal clear. So do you think this could impact the decision-making process in the General Affairs Council in June? Could the member states then separate both countries? There is, so I will come back to what Jacopo said. If it's delayed, the decision, especially for North Macedonia, do you foresee any risk for the political stability in the country? Thank you.
I think our message is very clear. We stated clearly in the reports publicly, and I think this press conference is a good opportunity to do so again, that the recommendation the Commission gives to the Council is to open the accession negotiations with both Albania and North Macedonia as soon as possible. They are ready. This is our assessment. Then, as Commissioner Hahn was saying, the discussion now is on our member state side if the member states are ready. But North Macedonia and Albania are both ready, and we state this for the second time after last year's recommendation. They are ready to start negotiations, which is starting a process of negotiations for accession. So it's not entering the Union tomorrow morning. It's a complicated process, but they're ready to start negotiations. The wording is different because the countries is different. The countries are different, the situations are different, but the recommendation is clearly to open accession negotiations with both Albania and North Macedonia, as it was last year.
If I may only add, again, in order to avoid any misunderstanding, because you were saying about remarks and conditions, there are some additional remarks, but no further conditions. And the recommendation is crystal clear to start negotiations.
Athanasios.
Athanasios, CNA, Cyprus News Agency. We read the report in Turkey and the precise statement on the exclusive economic zone. So the next question would be, what do you have in mind for a follow-up? We're approaching the June summit, and if we remember correctly, the June summit was set for a re-evaluation of the situation on the ground and further potential measures or response, which I think in your statement was called inappropriate response. So what is inappropriate response at this stage? What it could be, sanctions, measures, whatever. Could you please tell us? Thanks.
I'm convinced we will discuss this further, first of all, at my level with the foreign ministers, and for sure at the President's level in the coming weeks appropriately. As you mentioned, we have a Foreign Affairs Council in a couple of weeks from now, and as I mentioned several times, we will continue monitoring and following the situation very closely, and I'm constantly in contact with the Cypriot Foreign Minister to assess the situation as we move forward. So I am sure it is not for me to, and especially in this press room, to prejudge any move that, or any decision or any discussion that the European Council might take at the end of June. It's 1 month from now, by the way, so still quite some time to go, and most importantly, from an institutional point of view, this would be inappropriate from my side. But we will consider things as they develop, first of all with the foreign ministers at the Foreign Affairs Council on the 17th, if I'm not wrong, of June.
I see 2 more hands, and then we'll conclude as we have been going on for almost an hour. Lady in pink. You need to take the mic.
I'm Marcela Carapancho from Albania, A2 CNN. Will the crisis, the political crisis in Albania, affect the decision of the European Council in June, or maybe it will be postponed for September, the decision of the European Council for Albania? Thank you.
As I said, the assessment and the recommendation from the European Commission is clear that Albania is ready to start negotiations for accession. You refer to a political crisis. First of all, which country is not going or has not gone through a political crisis? Secondly, in Albania, I think every time we visited, there was some political turmoil or crisis, and similarly happened in other countries in the region. And our assessment is never political, it's always technical. And we have seen that Albania has done its part, in particular when it comes to the work on the vetting system and the judicial system reform. So our recommendation, and also on all the different other tracks of work that were identified. So the recommendation is clear to the Council to open negotiations with Albania.
Gentleman at the back.
Tim, Austrian TV, two questions, if I may. First one to the High Representative. You reiterated the fact that Turkey is moving away from the European Union, but also its strategic importance. How long should the European Union stand on the sidelines and wait for Turkey to change directions? Second question to Commissioner Hahn. I can't spare you this question, given the political situation in Austria and the current crisis, the provisional government. Do you see your chances rising of being a member of the next commission? Would you like to remain in your post? Do you think that Austria is weakened by the current crisis? First to the High Representative, please. Thank you. And Commissioner Hahn, maybe you can answer and respond in German, because it's always really weird if you're in English on the TV in Austria. Thank you.
We also have interpretation in more languages.
But you see, the Austrian journalists are less disciplined than the Italian ones. So I didn't get any questions on Italy, which I'm very proud of my Italian colleagues here in the room. Thank you for that. I was spared. What was your question? Sorry, I focused on the Austrian question. Turkey, yes. No, I can't. On Turkey, we are not sitting and waiting. On the contrary, we are engaging, and in particular, Commissioner Hahn and myself at our level, we are engaging constantly with our Turkish counterparts, not only the institutional ones, but at all levels, and also in other contexts, because, for instance, we cooperate closely with the Council of Europe leadership, being Turkey a very important member of the Council of Europe. With them, we're working very much on all the rule of law and judicial cases. We're constantly engaging with Turkey. We see sometimes some openings and then some steps backwards. We see sometimes some statements reconfirming the commitment towards the European Union perspective, and then some practices that bring us in a different kind of scenarios. And on the foreign policy angle, I can tell you the engagement is not only constant, but also constructive and positive, because on some issues in the region, we work closely with them. Not always we agree, but we constantly work together. So definitely there is not a passive attitude from our side on the Turkish developments. There is a respectful attitude, but also very firm on which are the principles, which are the rules, which are the standards. And it's a free choice to come closer to the European Union and finally, eventually, a member of the European Union or not. You choose it, you know what comes with it, and it's your choice, it's your people's choice, in principle, to define whether you want to go that way or rather not. So it's a constant dialogue. As I said, sometimes we see some openings, sometimes we see some setbacks. We try to encourage the openings. We try to engage also with civil society as much as we can, and try to encourage positive developments.
Ja, zu der wenig überraschenden Frage. Die aktuelle Situation in Österreich ist sicherlich nicht dazu angetan, die Durchsetzungskraft hier in Brüssel in den nächsten Wochen zu steigern. Ich habe auf das öfters aufmerksam gemacht. Der Herr Bundespräsident sieht das genauso, aber der Souverän in Gestalt der politischen Parteien hat eine entsprechende Entscheidung im Parlament getroffen. Das ist zu respektieren. Logischerweise ein Übergangskabinett, eine technische Regierung hat niemals die gleiche Stärke wie ein unter Anführungszeichen normales eine normale Regierung. Aber ich denke, dass die Aktivisten hier in Brüssel mit ihrem Standing einiges ausgleichen können. Und in diesem Sinne werden wir das alles schon hinkriegen. Und zu meiner persönlichen Zukunft zum heutigen Zeitpunkt kann ich dazu gar nichts sagen. Sie wissen, ich mache meine Arbeit gerne, aber es liegt jetzt nicht an mir, hier Entscheidungen zu treffen.
So with this, I see no more questions. We've been here for an hour. You have a lot of reading to do, so I thank you very much. Wish you a nice afternoon and a good long weekend. Thank you very much.